Welcome to the Gaming Codex, the show where I try to explain to you all the various terms and words used to describe the video games industry and video games in general. Today's word is fantasy, and just like every other term on the show, this one too has not had a very good time in the past couple of years or decades in general. Let's start off as usual with the dictionary definition, and for fantasy that would be imagination, especially when extravagant and unrestrained. Yes, unrestrained imagination, that is fantasy. That is like having a city of doors where streets can give birth and where a single person can be the embodiment of a letter. And all this is happening on the top of an infinitely tall pillar. That's fantasy, that's far out. Of course, that's Planescape, and it's sort of taken from D&D and then translated into video games, but still, that's an amazing, fantastic concept. Or like you had in Alice Madness Returns with just about everything in that game, like a cathedral that was a giant train, which was then kind of ripped off by every other game. The core of fantasy is limitless imagination, limitless potential, anything you can think of, that it is. Wild and free without the chains of reality, of normality holding it down. Dreams brought to life before us. Fantasy can give us an insight into the creativity, into the potential creative nature of man like nothing else can. And in the video games, that doesn't change. Because not only can you ask someone to dream for you, but to let you play their dreams. Now, what is the popular definition of fantasy? Elves and shit. Because that's what fantasy is when talking about video games. It's elves and shit. Hey, it's got elves and shit. Must be fantasy. Yep, that's high fantasy, that's fantasy in general, or if it's low fantasy, it's got people in loincloths and shit, and some magic in there, tiny bit of magic. Usually not the interesting kind of magic. Magic is kind of getting a bit of a bum rap in recent years. It's being frowned upon badly and being systematically made more boring with each new video game, especially in the Elder Scrolls series. Speaking of which, do you know what the marketing definition of fantasy is? It's not elves and shit, no, it's dragons and shit. Coming from the idea that Dungeons and Dragons has dragons in it, and now that's popular, so we can market dragons to people, and that's fantasy. Also, Game of Thrones has dragons in it, and that's fantasy, so fantasy is dragons and shit. Mostly shit, a lot of it, like unearthly amounts of it, of the same goddamn repetitive they don't even do anything with it. Like, okay, have a high fantasy world. Do something with it. The Witcher did. Like, The Witcher has a high fantasy world. It did something with it. Something interesting, something good. Few people do. Few people, like BioWare, oh god, BioWare doesn't anymore. And when they do have an interesting-ish fantasy world, you basically hear about the interesting stuff in the backstory of characters and in dialogue. You don't actually see it, you don't actually play it. Because why would you? I mean, you've got dragons and shit, right? That should be enough. It's not. That's not fantasy, that's just dragons and shit and elves and shit. Mostly shit. Kinda makes you wonder what happened to all the dreams, all the dreamers, all the people that started out thinking, you know, I'm gonna make a game that's so fantastic, so amazingly fantastic and fabulous and out there that it will redefine fantasy. Well, they probably started working for EA and got the soul ripped out of them. I actually believe that's how they maintain the Madden license. Well, that is it for this edition of the Gaming Codex. Come back next time when we will tackle a new term when it comes to video games. One that may be a bit old. Thank you for watching this show. If you enjoyed it, please consider watching some of our other videos and maybe sharing them or giving a thumbs up if you feel like it. And if you really liked what you saw, please check out our Patreon page. For just $1 a month, you could help us make much better shows and get some rewards in the process. Or you could consider buying my book called Tale of Doom. Volume 1 is out now and available for just $2. And as always, if you thought it was horrible, you know where to find me and complain about it.